person to ask this, is that someone told me this, so this could be wrong, that veganism and plants is actually hurting animals more. Isn't there something? Can you explain that?
Yeah. So we talked about this a little bit earlier. So when someone makes this intentional choice to be vegan and vegetarian, great first step. We can go back to the health issue, but let's just put the health issue aside. Let's talk about environmental issues or ethical issues. I think a really laudable thing that vegans and vegetarians may believe is that they don't want to cause excess suffering in the world. Great. What we understand as humans, and this is a very interesting thing for most of us that didn't grow up in the woods, is that in order for something to live, something else must die. This is just the way life works. And it's kind of a hard thing.
That is not true. Not at all true. And especially with him being unspecific on what he's talking about, this could be extraordinarily stupid. Nothing has to die for a plant to photosynthesize. You could have a plant, plops out a seed grows, photosynthesizes, there you go. You can also have a monkey eat the fruit of a plant, but the plant is still alive. Nothing had to die in that process unless he considers eating a fruit a death. In which case, like if he's talking about just a plant cell dying being what he's talking about here, but if that's what he's saying, then like us just existing because our cells turn over, does he consider that death? Like, what does he mean by life exactly? Like, is it okay for me to kill and eat a person because a person's own cells are going to turn over and die?
Thing we wrestle with as kids. Like, I don't want to hurt anything, but this is the way of life, right? There's an interesting woman named Leah Keith who was a previous vegan. She became a meat eater, and she tells this story of having a garden. And
Leah Keith was never vegan.
Wanted to be a vegan, and she had this garden, but she realized that to have a garden, she had to kill the slugs because the slugs were eating her lettuce, and she had to put in manure or animal products to get the plants to grow well.
She didn't need to put in manure. She could have just gotten fertilizer.
But she realized, look, manure came from an animal, didn't have to kill, but the bones and the calcium, that had to come from an animal. And so there's a cycle of life and death.
Calcium does not have to come from an animal. Calcium is a metal.
You're going to kill slugs to even create the plants. But let's just think more broadly about plant agriculture. How do you grow plants? How is kale grown or spinach grown? It's grown in a field, probably in the Central Valley of California or somewhere, that was at one time trees. And at one time there were voles and mice or rabbits living there with snakes and beetles and bugs and birds in those trees. And so in order to get to that land to be able to grow plants, you have to cut all that stuff down, then you have to till the soil. And when you till the soil, you destroy the topsoil. So this is kind of boring soil, science. But
you do not have to till the soil depending on what plants you're growing.
The soil is a really interesting ecosystem, like our life science in the 8th grade. There's all sorts of things in the soil. There's all sorts of bacteria and fungi that are working together. There's earthworms. And when you till the soil, you release all the carbon dioxide in the soil. It just goes up into the atmosphere. So you're emptying the soil or the topsoil of the carbon dioxide. You're sort of destroying the soil. One way to kill ground and make it very bad for planting in your garden, your house, or to grow plants is to till the soil. So
yeah, well, we have fertilizer, Paul, so none of this fucking matters.
At this point, you've leveled the trees, you've killed trees, you've displaced birds, potentially killed rabbits and voles and anything else living in the soil. When you're killing the things in the soil.
Not to mention then harming the things that eat those things.
Exactly. So think about the thousands, the tens of thousands of lives that are lost.
Yeah, so the issue here is he's not providing a counterfactual. Would fewer of these animals die if you didn't do this? He provides no evidence for that claim. Like the animals he's talking about, like bugs, worms, they don't live very long. So care to provide any evidence that plant agriculture or just farming, period, causes any more of these animals to die?
The creation of a field to grow plants. And then you're growing the plants. Hopefully you're not putting pesticides on those plants, right? And if you are putting pesticides, is it glyphosate or some other pesticide, which is water soluble and leading into the water table?
Glyphosate is not a pesticide, it's a herbicide. He doesn't even know what a pesticide is.
Well, and it's ending up in our water table. So now you're harming everything downstream of that, whether it's animals, anything else in the life cycle that is eating those animals is going to buy.
There's no evidence that a certain, the dose makes the poison. So I'm sure if you were to dump metric fucking tons of this shit down a river, you would probably end up, or a pond, you'd probably end up harming animals. When glyphosate is sprayed, it's typically sprayed at a 5% concentration. So 5% of the mixture is glyphosate, 5% is water. Is that sort of concentration going into the environment harming anything? Haven't seen any strong evidence of that.
Bioaccumulate glyphosate is going to end up in our water supply. So unless you're purifying your water, it has pesticides and glyphosate in it. And then you might have to put nitrogen fertilizer back in the soil, because without animal input into soil, you will quickly deplete the nutrients required to grow those plants. So this has been happening for generations. And if you talk to any farmer, I'm good friends with Will Harris.
Yes, that's why we invented nitrogen-enriched fertilizer, Paul. This was an invention that happened right at the turn of the fucking 20th century. So before, we would do shit like find islands where birds were living. Birds would shit on these islands, and bird shit would like literally pile up miles high. And there were wars fought over this, over who owns some of these islands. There would literally be bird shit ships that would grab this bird shit, and then they'd use that for fertilizer because it was rich in nitrogen. We don't have to do that anymore because we found out how to create fucking nitrogen. We also use it for bombs, which is pretty useful for getting rid of fucking people like you. But, Paul is such a fucking retard. Like, yeah, dude, we solved these problems in the 20th fucking century.
Who runs white oak pastures in Georgia, and I've been to that farm. It's so fascinating. I mean, the 1930s and 1940s, these sort of fertilizer salesmen made a killing because they came with this nitrogen fertilizer that was discovered sort of in the World War II effort, I believe, and it just allowed plants to
No, that was before World War I, stupid.
Grow, but it's a fake solution. It's not actually the nutrients animals put back in. But what they do in white oak is they have cows on the land, right? So what people don't...
Yeah, so stupid. The point is nitrogen. All these other things, they're just minerals that you can easily get. The issue is nitrogen, you stupid fuck.
Realizes that when you have...
Like, this whole soil depletion thing is a myth. Soils aren't becoming depleted. We just have to replenish nitrogen.
Animals living on the land, you create a fertile soil and plants that grow just mightily. They grow so well. That's how the grasslands in the United States were grown.
So this is untrue. Nitrogen-enriched fertilizers are better than manure. That is, again, it has more nitrogen. You idiot.
Millions of bison pooping and peeing and walking and pressing their poop and pee into the ground, which moves all the nutrients back into the soil. It's a cycle. The ruminant animal, which is an animal with cloven hooves like a goat or a cow or a bison or something, eats the grass, which humans can't eat because of the silica. Grass is not food for humans. And then they cycle it back into the ground. So none of those nutrients are lost. They're putting it back into the ground, and they actually increase the carbon in the soil. So they're sequestering carbon into the soil, which is kind of where it belongs. So there's a real difference between plant agriculture and animal agriculture. And what people also fail to appreciate is that
this is not how animal agriculture works, Paul. What is the figure? Like over 95% of animals in the United States are factory farmed. And then he's trying to tell you, oh, bison are walking the plains and pissing and shitting on everything. And then the grass eats their piss and shit. And then the bison eats the piss and shit grass. And then we eat the bison. Then we piss and shit out the bison, piss and shit, grass, piss and shit, and it's all a cycle of piss and shit. That's not how it works.
The way to have healthy plants is to put animals on the land, because the poop and the pee from animals is what makes the soil healthy, and then you get amazing plants. The grass at white oak pastures is nuclear green, and it's neon green. It's the brightest green I've seen, and there's bugs and birds.
Cool story, bro. I love hearing cool stories. Yeah, the grass at White Oak's pasture glows in the dark because that's how grass is supposed to be. It glows in the dark because it's so full of piss and shit. Cool fucking story, you lying retard.
And when they move the cattle, I got to see them move 1,000 head of cattle from one field to another. These cows are so excited. They just run into this field, and it's just all grass that's regrown over the last few weeks. It's just like a buffet for them of the best, most evolutionarily appropriate, healthy food for cows. And they just run in, and they all spread out, and they start eating this grass. And then there's birds and bugs. It's just the way life is supposed to be, right? It's mirroring the way that these ruminants have moved on the land. So there's a real stark juxtaposition between what happens when you grow.
He really likes to romanticize just nonsense. Like what a lie. Like, oh, this is the greenest grass on the entire planet because cows piss and shit on it. Like, what a stupid fucking claim. Like, he can't just simply say, oh, this is like a natural life cycle. No, he has to add a flourish to everything. Not only is this grass green, but it's like a bright neon green that fucking glows in the dark.
Plants, and when you can grow animals, you do it.
Thanks for the
It makes a
gifted
lot of sense. I've never
membership,
heard it explained
David.
like that's very interesting.
Yeah, so from a moral standpoint, like even if you are growing plants the way that we do now, like there's something is dying. And I
Exactly.
think
So like the underlying vibe of self-righteousness, because there is a little bit of self-righteousness can sort of feel.
Yeah, so notice how he didn't provide any fucking evidence to the claim that more animals die as a result of plant agriculture. Didn't provide any evidence. All he said is, well, I went to this place where the grass was like really green.
Eliminated now after learning that.
Yeah, and look, you're going to have to kill one of those cows to feed a person. But you think about how much nutrition comes from one single life of a cow who has the end of its life. I mean, every animal on that field is going to die at one point, either by old age or if they're in the wild and it's the bison.
Well, Paul, judging by the way you look, you know, with your fucking droopy red bloodshot eyes, your fucking wrinkles all over your fucking face, looks like you're going to die of old age pretty soon. So, you know, a lot of people complain about me feeding my cat a vegan diet. You know, maybe you can go out in your backyard, piss and shit on the grass, and then make the grass really fucking green. And then I can, like, I don't know, take a bolt gun and shoot you in the head and then feed you to my cat. And then my cat can piss and shit on that grass. And then the grass will be really nice and green. And we can all remember you, you know, the life you lived, by that nice green glow-in-the-dark fucking grass.
Some cousin of a cow, it's going to get taken down by.
I think people also forget when things get killed in the wild, it's not like people talk about being humane.
Right.
If you've ever seen predators kill prey, it is. I mean, I had a dog, unfortunately, passed away, and it was we a long time when I was a kid. But
Thanks for the gifted memberships again, David. Appreciate it.
a bunch of coyotes got into our yard, and it wasn't like a humane kill. Like they ate this thing from the ass up while it was still alive. And like, that's how they kill in the wild. It's not a nice way to go. I would argue that it's more humane sometimes if a hunter takes out an animal that's getting older and maybe going. Because what happens is these animals age and they get old and they get slow, and the pack kind of leaves them, and then predators come in and they eat them, and they do it in a very violent, vicious way where they suffer.
Yeah, and the way that.
Yeah, like, Paul lives in Costa Rica, and there's some, like, pretty vicious gangs in Costa Rica. And Paul is a wealthy white guy. We wouldn't want gang members, you know, capturing Paul, holding him hostage, torturing him for his money. So let's do the humane thing and take out Paul before the gang members get to him. It's just the right thing to do. Like, would Paul rather get tortured to death by a Costa Rican gang? Or would he rather me shoot and kill him and feed him to my cat? You know, the answer is pretty obvious.
So there's a couple of ways that the cows can be raised. We talk about cows. And the best way is the blueprint of white oak pastures and other farms that are regenerative, doing it that way. And they're raising the cows on the land. They're rotating fields. They're only eating grass from the day they're born. I mean, I guess they're eating milk from their mothers, but grass and milk, what they're supposed to eat. And then when they're harvested, when they're killed, they're done in a very humane fashion. There are ways.
Yeah, that's a funny point, too. If you piss on grass, it tends to die. So it's really strange that he said pissing is good for the grass. Like, yeah, if you ever have a dog that pisses in the grass, they usually choose their favorite spot. All the grass dies around where these animals piss.
The cattle ranchers do this that are kinder, quote unquote, to cattle. And that may sound crazy, but what happens is you lead the cattle into this area where they're sheltered. It's kind of like a security blanket, and they don't freak out. They're in a paddock where there's supports on both sides, and then they use a bolt gun, and their life is over in an instant. It's essentially like a hunter killing an animal with one shot with a rifle. And look, it sounds crazy. We don't want to believe it, but we have to go back to what you said. There's always death to support life. And so I think that just gives us an imperative as humans. If I'm eating any food on the planet, whether it's a piece of kale or spinach or a cow, I should understand and appreciate that and kind of do the best I can in my life to honor that cycle, because I will be a part of that cycle at some point in my life.
I think people envision the way like some humans die of old age, where you go peacefully in your sleep. It's like that's not how it happens in the wild. They go and a pack of wild animals literally tears them apart limb from limb while they're still breathing and living. Like that's just how it goes.
Yeah.
That's the cycle of life out there in the wild.
Exactly.
By the way, this was literally a justification for slavery. Back during the American slave trade, there were anti-slavery activists. And the most common argument in favor of slavery at that time period was, well, we're doing black people a favor. If they were in their natural habitat, they would be at war with each other and killing each other. So, we're helping them by, capturing them from Africa and bringing them to the United States and, making them pick cotton. Would you rather them go to war with each other or die of disease in Africa? Well, it's just so bizarre, that line of argumentation that, oh, well, they'd die a worse death in the wild. Okay, well, black people would have died a worse death or had a worse standard of living in Africa. I guess that justified slavery, dipshit. These people are just scumbags.